Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. The morning it all started, I was working a warehouse job over in the industrial park. Half my crew had already stopped showing up. The other half kept arguing about whether the news was hyping things up or holding stuff back. Phones buzzed constantly. Some said it was a mutated flu. Others said a chemical leak. I didn't care what they called it. People were dying fast and not staying down. By the third day, police stopped responding to calls on the north side. On the fourth, I saw my first infected. Ray and I crossed paths on the fifth day. I didn't know him personally before that, but everyone around here knew who he was. Ran with his own crew, mostly kept things clean. Street business, but not stupid. The kind of guy people listen to without being told to. We met outside one of the liquor stores near the overpass. I went there thinking I could grab some propane canisters and powdered drink mixes before things went sideways. When I got there, people were already tearing each other apart over canned peaches. A kid maybe 17 got stabbed near the checkout lanes. Another man beat someone unconscious with a mop handle. Cops never came. Ray had 3 people with him. One of them bleeding from the forearm, but not infected. He saw me trying to keep my distance and nodded like he recognized me. Maybe he did. Doesn't matter. We both knew what needed doing. We spotted a delivery van across the alley. Keys were in the door. I helped him get his people inside. He asked if I knew any place better. I told him we should hit one of the big stores. We went east toward the highway where the Walmart sat between a pharmacy and a gun shop. We took back roads and skipped every major intersection. On the way, we saw an SUV flipped upside down in the median. Looked like someone crawled halfway out the sunroof and never made it. Ray didn't slow down. When we pulled into the Walmart lot, it was already a wreck. Abandoned carts everywhere. A burning sedan jammed up near the garden entrance. Windows weren't shattered yet, but the glass had blood smears. A group of people were arguing near the main entrance about whether to break in or keep going. One woman was screaming for her husband. A kid was kicking a vending machine. The front doors weren't opening anymore. Ray pulled the van around back. That was smart. Most of the back bays were locked up, but one delivery dock had a half-closed steel shutter that hadn't fully dropped. Looked like someone gave up mid-shift. We forced it up with a crowbar and rolled the van inside. Inside, it was half lit. Emergency lights were still running. Alarms were chirping from somewhere deeper in the store. We moved quiet, sticking close to walls. I had a ball-peen hammer. Ray had a short-barreled 12-gauge with 5 rounds. Near the pharmacy counter, we found a deputy laid out against a cabinet, breathing shallow. He had been bitten on the neck, not deep but already purple. His pistol was in his lap. When he saw us, he tried to raise it, then let it fall. Ray crouched down and told him we weren't here to rob anything. The deputy just said, "Don't trust the glass doors," and passed out. We pulled him into the optical section and used a blanket from the bedding aisle. One of Ray's guys stayed to keep watch while we searched the rest of the building. We found 2 employees in the break room. One was panicking, the other completely shut down. They had locked themselves in with vending machine snacks. We gave them a choice: stay put or help. The one who wasn't panicking said she knew the electrical panels and how to shutter the main doors. She joined us. I told Ray we had to lock down everything. People were going to start pouring in. We used pallet jacks to block sliding doors. Merchandise cages from the electronics section helped reinforce key exits. Garden center doors were already chained. We dragged shelving units across the widest windows. It wasn't bulletproof, but it would stop a mob, or buy us a few seconds if something started pressing from outside. Once we had basic barriers in place, we started clearing the building for survivors. A woman was hiding in the seasonal aisle under patio furniture. She refused to move until she heard a child crying. That child was under a checkout counter, just crouched, arms over his head, not moving. Maybe 6 years old, no parent in sight, no visible bites. I carried him to the bedding aisle and built a soft pen out of pillows and crates. We quarantined the bathrooms, sealed off one for anyone with symptoms, posted 2 people outside with metal batons and instructions not to open the door unless it was an all clear. Nobody argued. We counted 13 people. That included us, the deputy, the kid, and 2 people who hadn't spoken a word yet. Everyone looked dazed. Nobody had a plan. I told Ray we had to make one. That night, we went for the gun shop. It was 1 block over, next to a tax prep office. Windows were cracked but not smashed. Metal gates were still up. Ray used a battery-powered saw from our store to cut through the rear door latch. Inside was dark and smelled like solvent. We found hunting rifles, a few pump-action shotguns, and 5 handguns behind the counter. Ammunition was thin, most popular calibers already picked clean. Still, it was enough to arm a dozen people. We took only what we could carry without leaving prints. We didn't smash anything. Ray wrote a note on the counter. Borrowed in emergency. Will return if possible. Back at Walmart, we put the weapons under lock in a secure stockroom. Only 3 people had keys. Ray, me, and the woman from electronics who knew the camera system. She said her name was Camille. She had worked there 4 years and knew every blind spot. We posted plywood signs at the front entrances the next morning. Ray used red spray paint and stencils from Arts and Crafts. Rule 1. No violence inside. Rule 2. No stealing from each other. Rule 3. Everyone works. Rule 4. No open doors without council's say-so. Rule 5. Weapons are for defense only. By the 3rd day inside, more people came. Some banged on the doors. Some shouted. One man lit a flare in the parking lot to scare us into opening. Ray refused. We opened only twice in those first 10 days, and only when people were unarmed and agreed to search. The deputy woke up for a few minutes, told us his station had pulled back downtown and was fortifying City Hall. He said infected were moving in groups, not mobs, like they were being drawn to sound or heat. He passed out again and never really woke up. On the 7th day, he stopped breathing. We gave him a sheet burial out back near the shipping ramp. We spent every spare hour reinforcing. Carts were chained together and welded with a small arc kit Camille found in hardware. Ducts were sealed. We turned the walk-in freezer into a storeroom for dry goods and bottled water. Someone suggested radios. We found a few in the camping aisle. Range was short, but better than shouting. I accepted a post as logistics lead. My job was counting food, tracking meds, and rotating duty shifts. I slept in the layaway area with a clipboard under my head and a crowbar in reach. We heard no police sirens after the 8th day. Helicopters stopped flying. Phones showed no service. Local stations broadcast static or emergency tones on repeat. On the 10th day, we stopped hoping for outside help. Walmart became home. And like any home, we had to defend it. The difference was that this one came with sliding glass doors, 6 exits, 4 skylights, and more room than we knew what to do with. It wasn't just about who was inside anymore. It was about how long we could last once everything around us stopped working. That part happened faster than we expected. By day 155, everything had a system. We stopped calling it Walmart. Everyone just referred to it as the store, like there weren't a dozen others in the region all burned down or crawling with the infected. You said the store, and everyone knew exactly where you meant. We ran it like a camp, not a government. Ray made that clear early on. He hated politics, said rules were fine, votes were fine, but when people started thinking they were owed things by default, that's when everything came apart. So we laid out what we called the code, nothing fancy. 5 rules, painted on plywood and nailed to the entrance wall. We never added more. Instead, we built the rest around rotation. Every able body pulled their weight. Didn't matter if you used to be a lawyer or a janitor. We had 6 core duties: perimeter watch, salvage runs, sanitation, kitchen, childcare, and med support. Anyone over 60 handled basic tasks inside: folding clothes for trade, ration prep, inventory checks. Everyone else rotated. I ran logistics. Camille ran internal scheduling. Ray oversaw security. Anyone who wanted to question it could do so in front of the council, which met twice a week, every Wednesday and Sunday after evening rations. We tracked everything on a giant dry erase whiteboard posted on the wall near the pharmacy. Shifts were marked by color. Green was day, red was night, blue was emergency response. Each person had a tag that clipped under their assigned slot. Missing your shift twice in a row without explanation meant reassignment to trash duty or latrine cleanup, depending on how short we were. Nobody missed 3. Food management was my first challenge. Most of the good stuff was gone in the first month. Canned vegetables, meat, fruit, gone by day 30. We started rotating through dry goods next. Rice, oats, flour, boxed meals. The freezer section was useless without steady power, so we cooked as much of that as we could in the early days using portable propane griddles from sporting goods. A few people got sick from freezer-burned meat, so we dumped everything that smelled even slightly off after that. The garden center gave us room to breathe. Camille helped us set up shallow planters, using plastic storage bins filled with dirt pulled from parking lot medians. We used broken aquariums for humidity control and pulled in herbs, spinach, radishes, anything that didn't require deep roots or long grow times. Nobody expected a harvest that would feed us, but a few sprigs of oregano or green onions made plain rice bearable. Some said it helped with morale. I agreed. Security was tight. Weapons were checked in and out of a locked cage near the employee lounge. No one stepped outside without a buddy. If you weren't on rotation, you stayed put. All weapons were issued with log entries, 1 sidearm or long gun per 2-person team, with ammunition counted to the round. We standardized on 3 types, 12 gauge, 9mm and 5.56. Anything else we scavenged was stored or traded. There were 3 escalation levels posted at every exit. Voice commands first. If the threat kept advancing, you fired a warning shot, preferably into the air or into the ground. If the infected or the intruder still didn't back off, you aimed center mass and didn't stop until it was still. We drilled that into people from the start. And we had to. The infected weren't smart, but they were stubborn. Noise, light, heat, anything triggered them. They'd walk into fences, scrape their hands bloody on the metal, press until something gave. You couldn't reason with them, but you also couldn't panic. The council wasn't some idealistic round table. It was 4 crew, 4 civilians, and a rotating 5th member chosen at the start of every week by vote. We held sessions standing up, no chairs, no long speeches. If someone had a grievance, they had 3 minutes to speak. If it needed a ruling, we voted. If it didn't, we moved on. Most of the time, it was minor stuff. Someone stealing extra hand wipes, kids running in restricted zones, couples arguing about shared duties. Every now and then, something bigger. One guy got caught hoarding sweets. He'd been sneaking into the backstock and pocketing snack-sized chocolate bars, storing them in a hollowed-out air vent above the pharmacy. Said it helped him feel normal. We stripped his shift priority and reassigned him to latrine duty for 10 days. After that, he was clean. Never broke another rule. Another guy tried to sneak out drunk during curfew, carrying a rifle without authorization. That one was worse. Ray took his weapon, then banned him from armed duty indefinitely. Nobody questioned it. Still, the pressure never really let up. Diesel was running low. We only used the generator for 3 hours a night. 1 in the morning, 2 at night. Enough to power emergency systems, charge radios, and keep the med station functional. Diesel came from salvage runs, usually from abandoned fleet yards or derailed semi-trucks. But it was getting harder to find clean tanks. A lot had water or rust in them. We started filtering with layered rags and improvised water separators, but that only worked so well. There were whispers that the pharmacy on Maple Street still had insulin. Nobody from our group had been there in months. We'd marked it too risky. Narrow lanes, open glass storefronts, poor fallback angles. But now, one of the new families had a teenage daughter with diabetes, and we were running low on everything but aspirin and gauze. No one wanted to say it directly, but the choice was simple: take the risk, or watch your kids suffer. We called a council session, Ray stood at the end of the tools aisle with his arms folded. The father of the diabetic girl stood near the whiteboard with his hands in his pockets. He wasn't begging. He just asked for a team to go look. Ray didn't object. I volunteered. So did Camille. We agreed on a 5-person squad. Daylight run only, quiet gear only, suppressed if possible, but that wasn't a guarantee. At the same time, we knew we needed to recheck the sheriff's office nearby. We hadn't been back since the 3rd month. If we were going to make it through the winter, we needed more radio batteries, more handcuffs, and anything resembling trauma supplies. Most of the people in charge were just getting by. We had no real medics, just 2 people with nursing backgrounds and a retired EMT who walked with a limp and slept in the stockroom. Some of the younger people had started pressing for more say in how things were run. One of them, Elias, a former high school coach, asked to propose a civilian-led council to balance out the crew's authority. Ray didn't shut it down, but he wasn't happy about it either. He pulled me aside later and said the second we start voting on whether or not to do the smart thing, people start dying. He wasn't wrong, but I didn't say that out loud. We started prepping that night. I helped pack dry rations into converted lunch kits. Camille checked radio frequencies. Ray counted rounds and made a note in his log. Nobody knew what was waiting out there past the half-mile perimeter. That was the thing about living inside these walls. Time started to feel stable, even when it wasn't. It made you soft. And outside, soft people died fast. We stepped out before sunrise, while the sky was still cold and the air held that quiet weight it gets before something breaks. Camille was up front with me, radio clipped to her vest, a sidearm holstered on her hip, and a small med bag slung over her shoulder. Diego carried the main pack with our extraction gear. I carried the short-barreled 12-gauge Ray issued me the first week we fortified the store. We didn't bring any rifles. Too long, too loud. You needed close-range tools when space was tight and time mattered more than distance. The girl with diabetes, Tasha, was still asleep when we left. Her dad didn't speak to any of us as we moved through the gate, just stood there near the barricade with his hands in his pockets, nodding once as we passed by. The wind carried no sound, but the creaking of tarp against fencing. Even the infected were quiet that morning. We followed the service road out past the tire shop and took a hard left through the back lot of a shuttered Chinese buffet. Cars were still crammed in the lot like the apocalypse came mid-lunch. Some had doors hanging open. One had a fire-damaged engine block. No bodies, at least not anymore. Not in sight. The pharmacy on Maple wasn't huge. It sat between a laundromat and a shuttered DMV. A blocky single-story building with wide front glass windows covered by old metal shutters, some partially peeled open at the corners. We didn't approach directly. Too exposed. Camille led us through the wreckage of a dentist's office next door, and we picked our way across a narrow gap lined with overturned dumpsters and broken pallets. The smell in the alley made us all gag, but nobody said a word. We moved up to the back service door in staggered formation. The handle had been ripped off, but the latch was still in place. Diego checked the hinges, while Camille scanned the street behind us through the gap in the bins. I wedged the butt of my shotgun under the frame and gave it a twist. The metal groaned but didn't break. Camille pulled out a rusted pry bar from her side pouch and jammed it into the seam. We rotated in silence until we heard a pop. The latch buckled. I held the door half open while she slipped inside first, flashlight beam pointed low. The interior smelled of spilled alcohol, dust, and something rotting. A shelf had collapsed behind the counter. Loose pills were scattered across the floor like gravel. Cabinets had been jimmied open, boxes torn. Whoever came through here before us wasn't surgical. It looked like a panic raid. Maybe 2 weeks old based on the smell. Maybe more. We worked fast. Camille called out what to take. Antibiotics, insulin, metformin, pediatric fever reducers, wound dressings, oral rehydration salts. I grabbed gauze, burn cream, and antiseptic swabs. Diego found a small fridge under the back counter still sealed. He opened it and gave us a thumbs up. 3 insulin packs inside with still partially frozen gel packs. They went straight into the insulated pouch. No time to test it. Cold was better than nothing. I stepped into the side aisle to check for portable oxygen tanks. None, but I found 2 unopened cartons of gloves and an untouched pack of thermometers. I shoved them into my satchel. Camille waved me over. She'd found a locked drawer that hadn't been broken yet. We pried it open and found 6 glass vials, likely antibiotics, along with syringes and sealed alcohol pads. I tucked them carefully between 2 hand towels and slid them into the med bag. The sound of footfalls outside stopped us cold. Not the shuffling scrape of infected, not the erratic pacing. These were steady, measured, close. Camille dropped low near the service entrance and peeked through a crack. She looked back at me and held up 2 fingers, then a third. 3 people, walking slowly, no groans, no gasping, not infected. We waited. The steps stopped just outside. One of them knocked on the door. Not hard, just 2 knocks. Pause, then 1. I didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. The knock repeated. "Don't mean no harm," a voice said, male, calm. "Just looking for medical. You got anything to spare? We'll trade. If not, we're gone." Camille looked at me. I looked at Diego. No one moved. Then I pulled open the door 5 inches and kept my shotgun angled low. 3 of them, 2 men, 1 woman, all thin, hollow-cheeked. One carried a crowbar, the other a tire iron. The woman had a metal bat. Their eyes didn't dart around, didn't flinch. They were serious, not desperate. That was worse. I told them we had nothing to trade, that we were running light. The man with the crowbar shrugged and said, "You came prepared." We didn't. We got a kid with an infection and a busted toe. She can't walk more than a few feet. If you have gauze and something for pain, that's all we need. I stepped back and opened my pack, pulled out a sealed roll of gauze, 2 packets of ibuprofen, and a can of soup. Threw them out the door in a plastic bag. He picked it up, didn't say thank you, just nodded once, turned, and walked off. The woman looked over her shoulder, stared at us for a second longer than she needed to, then followed. I memorized their faces, all of them. Something about how quiet they were sat wrong with me. Desperation makes people loud. Planning makes people dangerous. We cleared the rest of the back room, grabbed one last bundle of sealed wipes, and sealed the fridge behind us. We exited through the front aisle and ducked behind the side exit, using the serpentine path of overturned racks and carts to stay hidden. As we turned down the alley toward the laundromat, Diego tripped. His knee slammed into a metal pipe sticking out of a collapsed dryer. He grunted, but the real problem was the crash of the dryer drum rolling over. It echoed down the alley and bounced off the buildings. We froze, then we heard it. A sharp growl, then 2. Then the unmistakable scraping of infected feet coming from the far side of the street. Camille shoved Diego to his feet. I pulled 2 cans from my satchel and flung them down a side lane. The clatter drew attention, but not enough. We needed something louder. I broke a car window with my shotgun stock. The alarm screamed into the morning, a high-pitched wail that shattered whatever silence remained. The infected turned instantly. Shadows darted across the intersection, at least a dozen, maybe more, emerging from alleys, doorways, and the hollowed husk of the DMV. We sprinted. No gunfire, no shouting, just hard steps, tight breaths, and the slap of boots on pavement. Diego limped but moved fast. Camille stayed behind him, ready to drag him if he stumbled again. I brought up the rear, watching corners, checking rooftops, scanning shadows. The infected swarmed the alarm site. They pounded the hood of the sedan, smashed against the doors, pushed over trash bins. We didn't stop to count. We took the alley south and cut behind the diner, where we'd staged 2 empty shopping carts and a ladder across the alley wall. Camille went up first, then Diego, dragging the med bag. I climbed last, shotgun slung over my back, hands on cold steel, fingers slipping once before finding grip. On the other side, we landed behind the grocery outlet loading dock and disappeared into the long route home, the kind that took twice as long but crossed 3 decoy traps and 2 visual blockers. We reached the store perimeter just before sunrise. Bailey, our perimeter runner, spotted us first. She gave the signal. 2 mirror flashes from the garden watchtower, and Ray opened the south gate 10 seconds later. Camille called out our names, followed by "no contact," and we were let in. The gate locked behind us. Nobody clapped. Nobody smiled. Camille just handed the insulin to the waiting medic and walked toward the kitchen. Diego sat down hard near the security cage and pulled off his boot. His ankle was swollen, but not broken. I checked the ammo log, returned the shotgun, and marked our return time on the board. Ray asked if anything went wrong. I told him everything. The 3 outsiders, the alarm, the swarm, the routes we took. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded slowly and wrote a note in his little pocketbook. Then he told me to take the rest of the day off. I didn't rest the rest of that day like Ray told me to. I stayed busy, mostly down in the storage aisle, restocking gauze rolls and tracking what we used on Diego's leg. The med bag Camille carried in came back lighter than I liked. Every trip out there chipped away at what we thought was a stable pile of supplies. Between that and the outsiders we ran into, it was enough to make the back of my neck itch. Later that night, after dinner was served and curfew was called, Ray met me at the edge of the garden center by the tool racks. He said one sentence and nothing more. "We check the shop tomorrow." That was it, but I understood the rest. Ammo was down to levels we couldn't ignore, and it was time to reopen the second lockup we'd sealed during the early weeks. The gun shop was 1 block east of the store, at the edge of what used to be a small strip mall with 3 dead storefronts and 1 barely standing pizzeria. We'd broken into the place during the first week, when the infected still moved in scattered 2s and 3s. Back then, we didn't have a lot of gear, or people we trusted. We just took what we could carry, sealed the rest, and barricaded the place behind old lockers, wire fencing, and a chain and lock crossbeam made from a truck bumper and a garden hose reel. Ray, myself, Camille, and 2 others, Jake and Jamil, went out right after the morning generator cycle. No one carried full gear, shotguns and sidearms only. No long guns unless we had to pull something from the cache. I carried the crowbar again. Camille took the keys. We kept chatter to a minimum. The parking lot outside the shop had changed since we last saw it. 2 more burned-out vehicles had been dragged across the entrance. Someone else had tried to block access, or maybe trap it. We didn't approach from the front. Ray led us around the rear, where we'd sealed the second entrance. No signs of break-in. Camille undid the locks. It took her a few minutes. The smell hit first. Not rotting, but musty. Mold. Dampness. One of the back vents must have failed. A few cases of ammunition had white fuzz on the cardboard. We didn't touch those. We opened the sealed boxes on the top shelves first. 12 gauge, 9mm, a few 22 bricks, and 5 boxes of 5.56. That was the real gold. We inventoried what we had left. Camille made 2 new weapon kits from scratch. Each one a handgun, 2 magazines, 1 box of ammo, flashlight, and a sheath blade. The shotguns were cleaned and rewrapped in plastic. The long guns were tagged and logged. Ray made sure we only moved what was safe. If anything looked swollen, rusted, or mismatched, it got shelved with an X tag. We resealed the back with a double chain and camouflage tarp, just in case someone was watching. We left 2 small stashes hidden in the wall insulation behind the maintenance closet. A backup Glock with 1 loaded mag and 20 rounds in a freezer bag, and a spare handheld radio with 2 lithium packs, emergency kits, just in case we ever needed to fall back. The next stop was the sheriff's substation on the west side. The place had been abandoned around the same time the rest of the county pulled their forces downtown. We'd heard radio calls out of there during the first month, but nothing since. Some of us figured the place had already been stripped. Others thought maybe it still had something useful. Either way, it was a risk worth taking. We approached it from the north, passing through a fenced-off auto yard where the old cruisers used to park. The fence was still intact, and the windows were mostly unbroken. It was quieter here than near the strip. No visible signs of movement. No birds either, which was strange, but not unheard of. The side entrance had been padlocked from the inside. We broke in through the front lobby by prying the double glass doors off their hinges. Once inside, we moved room by room, checking corners, listening for movement, feeling for airflow. No signs of infected, no blood trails, no broken glass. It looked like the place had been left clean and in a hurry. We found 2 vests in the equipment room, both expired but still structurally sound. They weren't modern military-grade plates, but they'd stop a punch or a claw swipe at close range. The radio desk had been stripped of its comms, but we found 5 unopened battery packs in the storage cabinet, still in plastic. Camille tested 2 on the spot. Both worked. That alone made the trip worth it. In the back locker room, Jamil found a crate of city maps, laminated and folded with notes scribbled in blue marker. Old barricade plans, evac routes, block-by-block markings showing known hazards, dead zones, staging areas. Most were outdated now, but a few matched up with places we'd scouted ourselves. That gave us confidence the rest of the maps might still be useful. We took the best 4 and rolled them into tubes, sealed in shrink wrap. We cleared the whole building. 1 level, 1 hallway, 1 cell at a time. The cells were empty, clean, no signs of violence, no stink of death. It felt wrong that something could still be this untouched after 5 months, but we didn't question it out loud. Ray called it. He said this place would be Redoubt 2, a fallback point in case the store ever got overrun or compromised. We stashed 2 cots in the old holding room, brought in 3 water jugs, and labeled the rooms with chalk. Camille set a coded lock on the front entrance. We left a spare key hidden in the air vent above the dispatch desk. The council would log the location, and only 5 people would know the code. By the time we left, the sun was halfway up, and the wind had changed direction. On the way back, we took the east perimeter trail around the edge of the industrial park. That's when we heard the siren. It wasn't loud, not anymore. Just a faint, warbling whine, buried under layers of distance and weather. But it was real. A low, continuous tone echoing out of the chemical plant about 3 blocks away. Nobody spoke for at least 10 seconds. We stopped walking, just listened. Camille pulled out her binoculars and scanned the skyline. I followed her gaze. The main stack from the chemical facility was still standing. No smoke, no movement, but the security siren, the one tied to the perimeter breach alarms, was active, at least partially. Either it had just started, or something had triggered it for the first time in a while. We logged the location, added a new caution zone to our map, and marked it for avoidance. Ray didn't like the sound of it. None of us did. Even if the place had working power, there was no reason for an internal breach alarm to be screaming now, unless someone, or something, had tripped it. We returned to the store by late afternoon. Camille locked the main entrance and filed the Redoubt 2 key in a tagged pouch behind the council board. Jamil logged the vest inventory. Jake carried the radio batteries straight to the charging station and ran a voltage test on each one. All 5 held charge. 1 tested at 90%. We didn't celebrate, but it felt like a win. For the first time in weeks, I saw people sit down near the break room without rushing through their food. Diego asked about the sheriff's office. I told him we had 4 new maps and 2 working vests. His face lit up like someone gave him a hot meal. Ray met me later by the loading dock. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at the sun dropping behind the far hills and said, "We got options now." I nodded. That was the truth. Between the store, the gun shop and Redoubt 2, we had fallback points, caches and cross routes. If something came through the walls, we wouldn't get trapped. Not easily. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Most people didn't say it out loud, but the air had that feeling again, like the city was holding its breath. We knew the infected were still out there. We knew those 3 outsiders had seen us. We didn't know what they'd do with that knowledge. On the 3rd night, just past dusk, one of the perimeter teams on the East Watch spotted movement at the outer barricade. It started with a faint scraping sound, like metal dragged across asphalt. Then came the clatter of something heavy slamming against the gate near the collapsed garden center drive-through lane. By the time I got to the top of the lookout tower, the fire was already lit. A shopping cart had been pushed halfway up the access path. The basket was filled with garbage, shredded foam, broken plastic, and what looked like rotted packaging paper soaked in cooking oil. A piece of chain link fence bent over the top held it in place. They had lit it before sending it rolling. The flames were weak but visible. It didn't make it to the wall. It stopped about 15 feet short and burned low, putting out more smoke than heat. That wasn't the point. The fire wasn't meant to breach anything. It was bait, a test. Someone wanted to see how we'd react. We didn't fire. That was Ray's order. We'd drilled this exact scenario. He grabbed the bullhorn, climbed halfway up the tower, and called it out in a calm voice. This is a defended zone. Trade happens in daylight. No weapons in hand. One person at a time. No exceptions. He waited, then repeated it. We saw the silhouettes watching us from the tree line. One leaned against a mailbox, chewing something. Another crouched on the hood of an old van. The third paced in slow circles, like he was waiting for something. No one responded. No one came forward. Then we heard the rattle of cans. Northwest side. Ray swung the tower light toward the noise. I took off down the scaffold and ran the line west, radio tight to my shoulder. By the time I reached the second wall, Diego and Camille were already there. One of our trip lines, a string of empty soda cans tied with fishing line, had gone off. We scanned the fence. A figure was down on one knee near the storage container barricade. Hoodie, small pack, something in his hand. He was trying to duck between the two carts we'd chained across the fire exit. I raised my voice and told him to stop moving. He froze. Camille circled wide. Diego stepped in slow. The guy didn't bolt. He just looked up at me like he'd already made peace with what was going to happen. He had a folding knife, half open, a can of peaches in his coat. He never made it inside. We stripped the knife, zip-tied his hands, and walked him back to the front gate. Ray stood waiting. He asked the man's name. Got nothing. He asked what they wanted. Still nothing. Ray didn't raise his voice. He just looked at the guy and said, "You do this again, we don't walk you back. We bury you out here." The man didn't argue. We cut the tie and pushed him out past the gate. He limped back toward the others. None of them moved to help him. After the gate was locked again, Camille checked every trip line. We added new ones, bells, crushed bottles, motion flags. I authorized the use of flare markers for the next 3 nights. If anyone breached past the first line, we'd light the sky and call every shooter to the wall. No hesitation. We weren't going to lose someone because we were being polite. Inside, things started to crack. That same night, a civilian named Rebecca, used to be an assistant store manager before the fall, called an open floor meeting near the clothing racks. She had a clipboard in hand and 5 people behind her, all civilians. She argued that the crew was making decisions without oversight, that the rules we posted were not up for discussion, and that it was time the rest of the survivors had a vote on how to respond to future attacks. She wasn't completely wrong. The crew did make most of the security calls. But that wasn't because we were trying to hoard power. It was because we were the ones trained for it, or at least willing to enforce it. That didn't matter now. What mattered was that people were starting to feel like they didn't have a say. And when people feel like that, the place starts to fracture. Ray listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shut it down. When she finished, he looked around at the rest of the floor and said, "You want to vote? Fine. We vote on everything now, starting with this. Who's willing to take the wall if the next group brings rifles instead of garbage fires?" Nobody raised their hand. Not even Rebecca. The room stayed quiet. That was enough for Ray. He didn't rub it in. He just turned and left. The next morning, I pulled Camille aside and said we needed a buffer. Something between full control and chaos. Not just to keep the peace, but because we couldn't afford fractures. "Not now," she agreed. Together we pitched an idea to the council, a mixed emergency committee. 3 civilians, 3 crew. Only activated under direct threat. They wouldn't run day-to-day operations, but they'd help make decisions during siege conditions. Who to engage, who to negotiate with, What protocols to shift? 1-week terms, rotating chairs. Surprisingly, it passed. Barely, but it passed. Rebecca sat on the first committee. So did Camille. Ray didn't argue. He just said, "As long as it works." That was his only comment. That night we adjusted the gate protocols. Anyone approaching after dark triggered an auto broadcast over the external speaker system. A 20-second warning about conditions, terms, and the risk of fire. Lights along the main lane were extended 10 yards outward using old flood lamps from the hardware aisle, mounted to scaffolding, and wired into a pressure switch behind the inner wall. Anyone stepping too close triggered light and sound. The next 2 nights nobody came. The fires stayed out. The trip lines stayed silent. But no one trusted the silence. We took turns sleeping in gear, weapons staged by the front wall. Food was portioned tighter. Not because we were short, but because the tension made everyone hungrier. It's strange what stress does. It doesn't just drain you, it makes your body forget how to rest. The generator hiccuped on day 160, not a full failure, but a warning. It kicked on like always during the morning window, stayed steady for 15 minutes, then sputtered mid-cycle. Half the emergency lights flickered out. The pharmacy went dark. One of the cooler banks near the med station clicked off and never came back. Ray killed the circuit and ordered a line check. Diego pulled the casing off the backup panel and found a black smear where the main junction had started to melt. 1 arc away from a full short. The diesel tank had been hovering near red for weeks. Nobody said it out loud, but we all knew. Each trip to the fleet yard brought back less. Some tanks had water in them, others were dry. The best ones were half full, but we were already draining those fast just to keep 3 hours of power each day. We cut the cycle to 2 hours. 1 at dawn, 1 just after sundown. No more overnight charging. No more extra cooking time. Everyone was told. Anything needing power had to happen on a schedule. No exceptions. Cold items were consolidated. We shut down 4 freezers and kept just 1 walk-in cooler active, insulated with foam, tarp, and layered mylar from the camping aisle. Ice packs were rotated in during generator hours, then sealed overnight to maintain temperature. The food inside wouldn't last forever, but we needed it to last long enough for the next salvage cycle. Camille led the overhaul of the water system. Until then, we'd been running 5-gallon buckets up the side stairs to fill barrels inside. It worked, but it wasted time and back strength. So we repurposed parts from the lawn and garden section, hoses, plastic shelving, drainage piping, and set up a rooftop rain catch that funneled into 2 large IBC totes secured behind the rear stairwell. The filtration system was basic, gravity-fed through activated carbon, coffee filters, and bleach dosed with exact ratios written on laminated signs. Everyone was trained on it. No improvising. That gave us cleaner water, fewer trips, but it didn't fix the deeper problem, fuel. Everything we had that mattered ran on diesel, propane, or muscle. We had only so much muscle. Propane was already down to 4 cylinders. We pulled most of the backup stoves and consolidated all cooking to a single line in the garden center, next to the reinforced vent bay. Meals were assigned by shift, no double heat-ups, boil once, serve twice. Leftovers were discouraged unless they didn't require reheating. Even with that, it wasn't enough. A kid got sick on day 162, little girl, maybe 9, lived with her aunt, who worked the sanitation shift. No known condition, no injury, just started shutting down. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, refused to sleep indoors. Slept curled up by the door to the garden center with a blanket over her head. The medic said it was exhaustion mixed with anxiety and sensory overload. Asked if we had anything for ear protection or sound control. We didn't, but we improvised. Camille took 2 soft headbands and stitched foam padding into the sides, like earmuffs. It helped a little. The medic also asked for quiet hours. Not silence. Just structured time when people couldn't argue, play music, move carts, or slam doors. We made a new rule. Between 2 and 4 p.m., the store went into half quiet. Lights dimmed, voices low, no hammering, no drills. If you needed to bang on something, You did it outside. Some people complained, said it felt like prison. Ray shut that down, said if prison meant we survived winter, then they could get used to it. We reviewed our maps and decided we'd try one more fuel run. There was a municipal fleet yard 6 miles north, on the edge of what used to be the sanitation district. We checked it once during the early weeks. Got a few cans out, but nothing reliable. This time, we'd go deeper. Camille plotted the route. I built the list. We needed diesel above all, but propane was secondary. If we found an industrial kitchen or an old supply van with spare cylinders, we'd take it. 2 carts were rigged with sled brackets and pulleys to help drag the loads. A team of 5 would go. Me, Camille, Jamil, Diego, and a runner named Mason, who used to do delivery driving in that zone. We left at first light. Cold air, no wind, good visibility. We carried 2 radios, a flare pack, and 1 bolt cutter kit in case of locked gates. Camille had the silenced 9mm. I had the shotgun. Everyone else carried sidearms and batons. No one said much during the walkout. Focus stayed forward. The fleet yard was ringed with 10-foot chain link, half collapsed in one corner. A pile of burned tires sat near the gate. Looked like someone tried to torch the lot weeks back but didn't have enough fuel to do real damage. We climbed over the stable section, dropped into the lot, and began searching. Most of the trucks were bone dry. A few had caps rusted shut. One had a busted fuel cell that had leaked into the ground and left a black stain. But on the far end, behind a rusted-out municipal bus, we found a maintenance tanker that still had pressure. The gauge was busted, but the tap was clean, and the fuel smelled usable. We siphoned 20 gallons into clean cans. That took most of an hour. 2 more gallons went into the backup jug for the generator. We tied the carts with rope, loaded them slow, and started back the long way, using alleys and pre-cleared routes with fallback markers drawn in chalk. We were halfway back when the ground shifted under us. It was sudden and deep, like something punched the earth from underneath. The air went tight. Camille stopped walking. I turned in time to see the skyline light up orange from the southeast. Not fire, flash. The shape of it pushed outward in a dome, low to the ground. No shockwave, not right away. Just light and heat and dust moving as one. Then came the pressure. Not enough to knock us over, but enough to make your balance forget what level meant. A dull thump passed through the bones before sound reached the ears. Behind the rooftops, a black pillar started climbing into the sky, broad at the base, tight at the top, with streaks of grey and yellow twisting into the clouds. It took a second to realize what it was. Camille was the first to say it. The plant. Just that. Nothing else. We turned and ran the rest of the way back with the carts dragging behind us, wheels bouncing over cracks and loose concrete. Every second counted now, not just because of what had exploded, but because of what the wind might carry. We hit the store gate and didn't wait for full protocol. I radioed the tower before we reached the outer lot. Full lock, full seal, shut everything. Ray responded instantly. By the time we rolled the carts through the side entrance, the loading bay had already been lowered and locked. Camille sealed the inside hatch and posted a warning sign. Contamination risk. No entry without mask. Inside, the air was still. The generator was off. Emergency lights glowed faintly overhead. The crew was already moving, taping plastic over vents, pushing towels under door gaps, sealing glass with tape and cardboard. We followed the containment protocols we wrote but never thought we'd use. Everyone near the perimeter was ordered to mask up or move inward. No exceptions. The siren at the plant kept going for another minute. Then it died mid-howl, cut off like a wire had been pulled. That was worse than the noise itself. We weren't close enough to see inside the facility, but the plume had started drifting. A yellow-grey haze curled out low over the horizon, spreading wide and slow. The wind carried it west. That gave us time. Not much, but some. Ray called a full store lockdown. We killed all HVAC intake fans, covered every exposed duct and cracked panel. Every rag we had was soaked in water and bleach, then pushed against anything that might let air in. The windows stayed closed. The skylights were already sealed with painted foam board. All doors went on lockdown. We issued cloth masks from the stockroom and handed out what few respirator filters we had to the outer watch team. No one left the building for the next 12 hours. It wasn't the explosion itself that scared us. It was what came after. By the next morning, the infected started behaving differently. Our northern scout tower had visual on a group of 5 infected wandering the far end of the industrial zone. Usually they moved aimlessly, stopping, shuffling, sometimes collapsing for hours at a time before getting up again. These didn't. They were jittery. Their pace was uneven, almost stuttering. Their skin looked blotched and discolored, like it had been burned or dried out. One of them clawed at a road sign until its nails split. It didn't stop. The vocalizations were sharper, short bursts, like coughing mixed with snarling. We watched them for 30 minutes. They didn't slow down. They didn't fatigue. They didn't change direction unless they saw something or heard something. When a crow flew overhead, one of them jumped for it and hit the ground hard. It didn't stay down. Got back up like nothing happened. That's when we realized these weren't just infected, they were altered. Not superhuman, not fast, but different. Their energy didn't drain like the others. Their attention didn't drift. They stayed focused. And worse, they stayed close to each other, clustered, pressed forward in the same direction, even when nothing obvious was drawing them. We called a full watch rotation. No one was allowed to patrol alone. All non-critical activity outside the main structure was halted. Camille posted observation logs at every tower with sketches and behavior notes. We gave the altered infected a designation, Plume Class. It wasn't official, just something to separate them from the baseline walkers. The next day, we saw a bigger group, 10 or 12, moving down the rail corridor toward the southeast depot. Same pattern, staggered movement, blistered skin, strange posture. They didn't respond to yelling from the towers, but when someone dropped a wrench off the scaffolding, they all turned in unison, not toward the sound, but toward the echo. We tested again, using a small radio left playing music on a car roof downrange. When we turned it on, nothing happened. But when we let it play for over 2 minutes, 3 infected turned toward it and didn't stop moving until the radio was shut off. That was new. The normal infected would veer off, lose interest. These didn't. Not if the sound was continuous. They locked onto it and pushed forward until contact was made or the noise stopped. Then we heard the horn. It came from downwind, southwest, where the tracks bent into the far industrial district, one of the old freight yards. A train horn blaring non-stop, either stuck or triggered intentionally. No rhythm, no pattern, just an endless bleating tone that punched through the low air like a signal flare. We scrambled to map its direction. The wind was carrying the sound northeast, directly across the path of the altered infected. Within an hour, every group we had been tracking changed course, turned toward the sound and started moving. At first it looked random, then it became clear. They weren't just wandering toward it, they were pulling others with them. Normal infected, slow, rotting, barely functioning, were being dragged along by the pace of the altered ones. The mass started to swell. 10 became 20, 20 became 50. The movement was uneven but steady. They weren't fast, but they didn't stop. We were watching a super horde form in real time, built not by instinct, but by sound, and it was headed toward everything in its path. We had hours, maybe less. Ray ordered emergency prep. Fallback lines were reinforced. Spare barricades moved into choke points. Every exit was rechecked. Ammo reissued by count. All outer workers were issued cloth masks soaked in vinegar and bleach. It wouldn't do much, but it gave people a job, gave them something to hold on to. We didn't know if the horde would reach us, but we knew that if it did, we had to be ready for something different. These weren't aimless corpses anymore. They had focus, and noise gave them purpose. Ray stood in the center of the electronics aisle and looked at the wall of dead screens. He told me one thing. If they come, we fall back to Redoubt 2. No hero plays, no stand at the gate, Everyone pulls back on signal. We spent the rest of that night running drills. Short, sharp, efficient. Each team had a route. Each family had a station. Every piece of gear was tagged and packed by the door. At one point, I passed Camille sitting on the stairwell with her mask off, looking at the horizon. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke. The air was too thick for words. The light outside had gone yellow-gray. Not smoke, not dust. Just off. At 5 a.m., the lookout on Tower 1 made the first call. Movement on the east corridor. Large group. Direction steady. No scattering. No loss of pace. We logged it, checked the map, and confirmed what we already knew. The altered infected, what we now called Plume class, were pulling everything toward the freight yard horn, and we were in the way. We initiated our sound discipline protocol immediately. All internal activity ceased except for whisper-level communication. Radios were set to vibration only. Generators remained off. No hammers, no tools, no cooking. Every entrance was sealed with doubled insulation layers, foam board, blankets, plastic sheeting. Nothing that could rattle, nothing that could echo. 2 nights earlier, we'd planted decoy noisemakers downrange. 5 battery-powered radios scavenged from the electronics aisle, each rigged with a 20-minute timer and taped volume switch. One played static. Another looped a talk radio segment from a USB chip we'd kept since the first month. The others ran mechanical tones, Morse, keypad beeps, a weather alert test tone. Each was placed 200 feet apart, in a staggered arc meant to bend any incoming horde west and away from the gate. At 0630 hours, the first infected reached the outer perimeter. It was a standard walker, normal pattern, low coordination, no blistering. It bumped the side of an overturned hatchback, turned, circled the base twice, then froze in place. Minutes later, 3 more arrived. One moved directly to the gate. Another sniffed the air and began slapping the aluminum siding of a food truck we'd parked to block the side lane. That one stayed longer. At 0710, the Plume class arrived. 5 of them, spread wide, 50 meters apart. They didn't hesitate. They didn't sniff or stumble or shift direction. They moved straight into the barricade line and pressed. One impacted the cart wall directly, bounced back, then rammed it again without sound. The others converged on vehicles we'd chained together, clawing and pushing with sustained pressure. No drifting, no wandering, no loss of intent. Normal infected peeled off quickly. Noise from the first impact sent 2 staggering into an alley. Another dropped after catching its foot on a curb, but the altered stayed locked in. By 0715, they doubled in number, still manageable, but too many to ignore. Ray gave the order to ignite the first burn line. We had 3 set up: front gate, loading dock, and garden lane. All were pre-rigged with shallow trays made from steel signage frames, filled with diesel-soaked cardboard, shredded cloth, and 1 strip of slow-burn ignition rope. I lit the front tray myself, held a road flare low, waited for the signal, then touched it to the soaked pile. It caught instantly. No explosion, just a rolling wall of heat and smoke that rose 6 feet and spread out across the open lane. The fire didn't stop them, it bent them. Plume class turned slightly, redirecting around the worst of the flame, but still moving forward. 2 caught fire. Neither stopped. One stumbled after catching the edge of a scorched bumper. The other fell trying to climb over the trunk of a charred sedan and burned alive against the metal. The stench was unbearable. Camille called the van team into position. Our armored vehicle, a reinforced former sheriff's impound van, had been staged for this exact scenario. It had been stripped of interior seating and fitted with roll bars, push bumpers, and a directional speaker rig. No front glass, steel slats over the windshield, top hatch fitted with a lookout slot. Jake drove. Camille rode passenger. I was in the rear seat, gripping the inside rail with one hand and holding a siren trigger in the other. We rolled out of the south gate and down the east access road, quiet until we hit the 90-degree bend where the street narrowed. That's where the bulk of the horde was beginning to cluster. No infected within 20 feet of us yet, but that would change fast. I triggered the siren for 6 seconds, a sharp rising wail, enough to pull every set of eyes toward us. It worked. Half the group turned instantly, some started running, others staggered in bursts. Plume class snapped to attention like dogs on a leash. We drove slow, no more than 15 miles per hour, leading them down the access corridor. Once we had 30 plus in pursuit, Jake killed the engine, threw the transmission into neutral, and let the van coast back toward the fallback lane. The siren was silent. We didn't make a sound. When we passed the first set of trip lines, I dropped a cold bottle full of rocks to give the next group something to fixate on. Anything to keep them looking the wrong direction. It wasn't perfect. 3 of them broke from the path and returned to the wall. One started climbing the cart pile, got halfway up before it lost footing and slammed its head on a sharp corner. Still moved, still tried to get up. Diego tagged it from the tower with a bolt-action rifle. 1 clean shot to the base of the skull. It took 2 more seconds to stop twitching. By 0745, we had the first wave moving downrange. At least half the mass had peeled off. The decoy radios were working. 2 of them had already gone silent after their cycles ran out, but they'd done the job. 1 group of altered infected had locked onto the radio static and wouldn't leave it, even when other sounds played nearby. That taught us something. Continuous noise was more effective than loud bursts. Consistency kept them moving. Variability confused them. We held the line for another hour. Spot fire used in 2 lanes. 1 decoy flame at the rear triggered manually to redirect a small flank group. 1 tower used mirrors to flash sunlight in wide arcs. Didn't stop them, but did cause hesitation in 2 infected who shielded their eyes and paused before resuming forward motion. That was new. We logged it. By 9 a.m., the crowd had thinned enough to pull teams off active watch. Not fully, not all the way, but enough that people started breathing again. No one left their posts, no one stood down, but the sense of immediate collapse had passed. Camille returned to the staging area and handed over the van keys. She logged the siren use, tire wear, and engine heat levels. Jake wrote down the rearm instructions for the next team. I climbed the tower and looked east. Smoke trails lined the horizon where our burn pits had flared and died. Beyond that, the horde was still moving, slowly, but now disorganized. Whatever cohesion the altered infected had established had started to unravel once they lost their target sound. Ray stood by the barricade, arms crossed, watching the distance with a hard stare. When I joined him, he didn't say anything for a while, just nodded once. The kind of nod that means, not yet, but close. We knew it wasn't over. The altered infected might scatter when the sound dropped off, but they didn't forget direction. The freight horn was still blaring in the distance, muffled now by weather and smoke, but steady. That meant the pressure would come again, and we couldn't count on decoys and fire every time. So we fortified inside, quietly, with whatever we had left. The kill corridors were finalized that same evening. We'd planned them weeks earlier but never built them out fully. Now we had no excuse. We tipped shelving along the main entrance lanes and reinforced them with shopping carts tied together using paracord and steel ties from the hardware aisle. Everything angled to create choke points, forcing any breach to narrow into lanes we could defend with melee or focused fire. Seams were marked in bright blue tape on the floor, fallback lines. Each seam had a name, a team assigned, and a trigger call. If we had to retreat, everyone knew where to go, who to cover, and what to hold. That took us 2 hours. No talking, just marking and shifting metal until the routes made sense. 2 interior doors, the double access to storage and the break room hallway, were pre-rigged with quick release chains. If we needed to fall back all the way inside, those doors would seal behind us with 1 pull and lock tight from the far side. Camille and I each carried the chain triggers around our necks on a metal loop. Last resort only. If we pulled those, it meant someone was being left behind. The garden center was cleared out and staged as the civilian fallback zone. All non-combatants were briefed. If the interior fell, they were to move into the garden center with pre-packed carts of food, water, medical, and blankets. We staged a ladder to the roof and secured it with a safety rig to prevent it from being pulled down or overrun. Anyone going up could take shelter behind the HVAC stack and broadcast on emergency radio bands using a solar-powered rig stashed in a sealed crate under the gravel bed. At 4 a.m., the wall gave out. It didn't explode. It didn't crash. It warped. The steel frame on the south loading bay door had taken too many hits in the first wave, and the brace we'd welded into place had started to split at the top weld. Pressure from the outside. It built slow, but it was constant. The side panel buckled in near the bottom, where two shopping carts were jammed together and duct taped to a shelving unit. The carts collapsed inward, and a hole the size of a tire opened up between the bars. The first infected came through crawling. Normal class, not plume. No eyes, torn fingers, one arm dragging. Ray shot it clean through the upper spine before it reached the first seam. The next one came standing, then two more, then another 7. Plume class arrived 30 seconds later. We held the breach using short weapons. No automatic fire. Every shot counted. Camille used a 20-gauge pump with birdshot loads. I switched to the modified pike we'd built from metal conduit and concrete rebar tips. Others had wood-cutting axes, crowbars, or bolt cutters tied into spears. We aimed for legs first, trip them, slow them, create a pile. Anything still moving was shot or stabbed in the head by second position. 2 defenders went down during the first 10 minutes. One, Marcus, got pulled when he stepped too far into the breach with a sledgehammer and lost his footing on an overturned cart. We got to him fast enough to pull him back. The other, Shiloh, was dragged under a fallen display stand and pulled out of view before we could reach her. We didn't see her again. Her trigger wasn't pulled. That meant she didn't make it. The fallback signal was called for seam 3. We shifted back in controlled steps, covered each other. Camille used a smoke flare to disrupt line of sight, and I popped a flashbang we'd been saving since the raid on the sheriff's office. It didn't stop them, but it slowed their coordination. Inside, Diego ran the quick weld on the backup braces. Camille and I rotated back to resupply and reload, then took a new route out through the garden center. I called for Team Redoubt and assembled a 4-person squad. Myself, Camille, Jake, and Elias. We circled the horde wide, using side alleys and ladder climbs to stay off direct ground routes. Our goal was simple: reach Redoubt 2, stage at the south fence, and create noise diversion using our last few noisemakers and flare rounds. By 5 a.m., we reached position. Jake placed the directional speaker we'd pulled from the van against a metal pole and ran a loop of construction site tones. Camille rigged 2 Roman candles into an open gutter aimed high and away. I triggered the speaker. It took 60 seconds before the horde reacted. You could see the head shift first, plume class infected snapping toward the sound like radar pings. Then the rest followed. Not all, not most, but enough. Enough to relieve pressure. We let the noise play for 3 minutes. Camille lit the Roman candles. They screamed into the sky and burst red and white. Perfect draw. I shut off the speaker at once. The others already moving in had no idea what happened. They paused, lost direction, began wandering. The cluster shattered. We fell back in silence. No one spoke until we were halfway down the rail corridor. Jake wiped blood from his boots without saying where it came from. Camille kept glancing backward like she expected someone to be chasing us. When we got back to the store, the breach had been sealed with a steel brace scavenged from a tire rack, welded fast at the corners, chained top to bottom. Burn scars still marked the ground from where we'd dropped fire trays. The stench of blood and diesel mixed into something oily and thick. We didn't sleep that night. Not fully. People dozed in chairs or stood on rotation with their backs pressed against cool metal. Camille sat in the pharmacy with her hands stained black from rebar soot. Ray didn't leave the tower for over 6 hours. I walked the entire floor twice. No one asked me to. I just needed to see that the aisles were still intact, that the taped seams were still there, and that the doors we locked hadn't buckled under the weight of too much hope. When the morning came, we counted. Ammunition first. 12 gauge was down to 27 shells. Total. 9mm was better, but only just. 93 rounds. 5.56 had 4 full magazines and loose spill in 2 plastic boxes. That was it. If another wave hit within days, we'd be on melee and burn trays alone. Fuel was even tighter. After the last van maneuver and sustained light run during breach repair, the generator tanks held less than 3 gallons. Propane was down to 1 cylinder, and the solar backup had already been drained overnight to run emergency comms and charge the radio log drives. Camille said we'd have enough for one final power window tomorrow, and then it was lights out until the next salvage. Food was stable, which didn't help morale as much as it should have. We had dry staples and preserved fruit, protein bars and sealed cans. Maybe 20 days worth if no one got sick or hurt. But food doesn't calm people the way power and security do. What settled in after the breach wasn't fear. It was something flatter, quiet. People didn't talk loud. No one played cards that night. No one asked about evening rations. They just sat near their own corners of the fortress and watched each other from under blankets and coats, like the walls might crack again at any moment. The council met late the next morning. We gathered in the seasonal aisle, between the bags of unopened potting soil and the last fake Christmas tree no one had the heart to take down. 8 of us sat. 2 stood. Ray leaned on the end of a display rack with a clipboard tucked under his arm. I wrote the chalk notes. Camille proposed the first revision, hard cap on generator hours, no more ad hoc use, strict scheduling, 2 hours daily, broken into 3 windows, 0 tolerance for extensions. The motion passed unanimously. Second, confirm permanent 2-base posture. The store remained central, but Redoubt 2 would now be stocked weekly, maintained by rotation, and kept ready for full evacuation if pressure ever surpassed our threshold again. We would store 2 sealed totes of food, 1 medical bag, 4 radios, 1 gas mask, and a duplicate water filter system. I offered to run the first restock myself. Third, expanded quiet hours. The Plume class infected were too reactive. We couldn't risk sound bleeding out from walls or windows before sunrise. Quiet hours would now begin 2 hours before dawn and run until the sun cleared the rooftop. That meant meal prep had to shift. Tool work paused. All voices below conversation level. Everyone agreed. There was no debate. Fourth, controlled trade window expansion. This one came from Rebecca, who'd fought us hard in earlier weeks but now spoke with her voice low and direct. She said the outsiders weren't going away, and if we didn't find a way to show them there was value in talking instead of circling our walls, then someone else would find a reason to press us again. We voted to expand the daylight trade window to include low-risk, barbed-free interactions at the far corner of the parking lot. 1 post, 2 guards, basic items only. Water, gauze, canned food, soap, all monitored, all logged. Fifth, final review of loss. We buried Shiloh behind the garden center wall that evening. She'd been found by Camille near the split corridor just before lights out. Her body had been dragged but not torn. We think the infected lost interest after she stopped moving. No one saw her last moments. We buried her with her utility knife, a patched jacket, and a handwritten tag with her name and birth year. No speeches, just 4 minutes of silence and a line of small rocks pressed into the soil in a single, even row. Marcus recovered from his injuries with 1 cracked rib and a shallow bite on the forearm, already sealed and treated. No sign of infection. We isolated him for 48 hours, just in case. He said nothing during most of it, then asked if he could help clean the wall. That was enough for us. The next day, I walked the full perimeter, every seam, every cart link, every patch of soot. I made notes where rust had begun to eat through metal, where one of the support braces had buckled just slightly from the weight of bodies we'd pushed off it. Camille joined me halfway through. She was quiet but steady. Her hands were wrapped in cloth tape, fingers blistered from welding gloves and rope burns. At dusk, the crew met again, this time just 5 of us. Ray read from the log. Camille checked the power schedule. Jake updated the ammo count. I opened the maintenance file and rewrote the fallback code list for the week. We couldn't celebrate, but we weren't mourning either. The worst day since week 1 had passed. The breach had come. The wall had held. The store was still ours. I stood near the front shutter just before final lights out. The metal was cool under my palms. The concrete outside still smelled faintly of fire and oil. Beyond the fence, nothing moved, but I knew better than to believe that meant peace. The city was changing. The infected were changing. The plume didn't just warp the sky, it warped them, how they moved, how they tracked, how they pushed, and it warped us too. The old rules didn't fit anymore. We couldn't just hold the line, we had to shift with it, learn faster, act faster, stay smaller, quieter, more deliberate. One roof and one diesel tank would not keep us alive through the next wave. That much I understood. We had to be flexible. We had to be mobile when needed. And above all, we had to be honest about what was coming. The store was not the fortress. The people were. The system we built, the way we held together, this was our defense. And as long as we kept adapting, we could make it. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.